Sign the papers right now, Brad yelled, shoving a pen so hard it skidded across the kitchen table and landed on the floor. I picked it up. I looked at the man who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. Okay, I said. And I signed my name. Candace snatched the folder like I'd handed her the deed to heaven. Her manicured fingers clutched it to her chest. Finally, we'll have movers here next week. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just walked them to the door and watched their BMW peel out of the driveway like they were escaping a fire. Then I called my lawyer, Martin. I said, my fingers steady on the old rotary dial. It's Margaret. He did it. He served me the papers. I signed. Silence. Then Martin's voice, low and careful. Did you sign the quitclaim, Margaret? The one you and I talked about. I signed exactly what I told you I'd sign. The original. The clean one. Good. Then let's make him regret ever asking. I hung up. I walked back to the kitchen and stared at the lemon bars I'd baked for him that morning. Still warm. Still untouched. I picked one up, crumbled it between my fingers, and let the sugar fall like snow over the blue-checkered tablecloth. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a doting old woman who would roll over and disappear into some state-funded nursing home while he and his wife painted my living room beige and called it a nursery. He forgot I was David O'Connor's wife. And David didn't raise a fool. I went to my bedroom closet. Behind my winter coats, behind the shoeboxes of old photographs, there was a steel lockbox I'd bolted to the floor 15 years ago. I spun the combination, our wedding date, and opened it. Inside were deeds. Trust documents. Bank statements from accounts Brad never knew existed. And a thick folder labeled Sarasota. I didn't just own a house on Maple Street. I owned a beachfront condo in Florida that had been appreciating quietly for 20 years. I owned rental properties in Ohio that brought in $36,000 a year. I owned stocks my husband had bought in the 80s when everyone else was selling. And none of it was in my name. It was all in the trust, the same trust where Brad was listed as a contingent beneficiary, which meant he wouldn't get a dime until I died. And even then, the trust gave me the power to change that designation at any time. I'd set it up after I caught Candace snooping through my jewelry box at Christmas 4 years ago. I'd found her with my mother's diamond ring in her hand, claiming she was just admiring it. I hadn't said a word. I just smiled and offered her more eggnog. That night, I called Martin. Add a clause, I told him. I want to be able to remove any beneficiary I choose. Without notice. Without explanation. Martin had paused. You sure about that, Margaret? I'm sure. Now, for years later, I was glad I'd listened to that voice in my gut. I pulled out the Sarasota deeds and laid them on the bed. Then I pulled out something else. A document Martin had drafted 6 months ago, just in case. A reverse mortgage application on the Maple Street house, filed in my name, using my life estate interest. Brad and Candace had taken the deed. But they hadn't done their homework. They didn't know that my life estate, which I'd filed with the county 15 years ago, gave me the right to live in that house until I died or voluntarily moved out. They couldn't evict me. They couldn't sell without my permission. And because I had a legal interest in the property, I had the right to borrow against that interest. Which meant I could take out a reverse mortgage on the house they now thought they owned. Martin had explained it like this. They'll own a house that's already mortgaged to the bank. When you pass, the bank gets paid first. If the reverse mortgage covers most of the value, guess what happens to their inheritance? It evaporates. I'd said, it evaporates. But I didn't want to destroy them. I just wanted them to understand that you don't walk into a woman's home, demand her signature, and walk away with everything she built. You don't get to treat your mother like a furniture waiting to be moved out. I wanted my son to feel what I had felt when he looked at me across that table and said, "You're sitting on it like a dragon on gold." Like I was a hoarder. Like I was an obstacle. Like I was not his mother. The next morning, I drove to Martin's office in my old Honda Civic. No senior shuttle. No bit. I was 64 years old, and I could still parallel park on a hill in the rain. And Martin met me at the door with a cup of coffee and a grim smile. You look like a woman with a plan. I'm a woman with a plan, I said, setting the deeds on his desk. File the reverse mortgage. Send them a notice. And send a copy of the trust document to Brad's address. Not to the house, to his P.O. box. I want it to land like a bomb. And the life estate? Remind them that I'm staying. I have no intention of leaving. If they want to paint a nursery, they can paint the garage. Martin laughed. You know, Margaret, I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've seen family fights over money. But this one has some style. It's not style, I said. It's survival. I raised that boy on my own after his father died. I worked double shifts. I wore uniforms that smelled like cafeteria grease, so he could have new sneakers for basketball season. And now he wants to put me in a home so he can turn my bedroom into a walk-in closet. That's the Candace influence? Candace is a symptom. The disease is that he forgot who I am. Martin nodded. I'll have the letters drafted and out by the end of the day. They'll receive them in 2 days max. Buckle up. That evening, I went home and sat on my front porch. The rocking chair creaked gently under me. Mr. Henderson walked his dog past my house like he always did at 6. Evening, Margaret, he called. Evening, Henry. You look different tonight. Something happened. I smiled. Something's about to happen. He didn't ask what. That's the thing about small towns. People know better than to pry. But I could see the curiosity in his eyes as he walked on. I sat there until the streetlights came on. I thought about David. He'd have been proud of me. He always said, Margaret, you're the strongest person I know. I didn't feel strong when Brad was shoving that pen at me. I felt tired. Small. Invisible. But now I felt something else. That I felt like a mother who still had lessons to teach. 2 days later, the letters arrived. I know because Brad called me at 7:13 in the morning. His voice was raw and shaking. Mom, what the hell is this? We just got a letter from some law firm saying you took out a reverse mortgage on our house. My house, I corrected him. Technically, it's still my house. You own the deed. I own the right to live here until I die. That's what a life estate means. I figured you should know. You planned this? His voice cracked. The whole time, when you signed the papers, you knew you had this trick up your sleeve. It's not a trick, Brad. It's a legal agreement I set up 15 years ago, with your father's blessing. He wanted me to be protected. He knew your wife had expensive taste. Don't bring Candace into this. She's in this up to her designer neck, I said. She's the one who told you to push me out. She's the one who said I was just an old woman rattling around. Well, here's the thing about old women, Brad. We hear everything. We remember everything. And we plan for the day when the people we loved try to erase us. There was silence on the other end. Then, muffled, I heard Candace screaming in the background. What do you mean there's a mortgage? She can't do that. We own it. Tell her I can, I said calmly. Tell her I have a life estate and that gives me borrowing rights. Tell her if she wants to sell the house, she has to buy out my interest. And that interest is substantial. Brad came back on the line. His voice was smaller now. Deflated. What do you want, Mom? I want you to come over. Tonight. Both of you. I want to have a conversation like adults. And I want you to bring the lemon bars you didn't take the first time. Mom. 7 o'clock, Brad. Don't be late. I hung up. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but I didn't care. It tasted like victory. They came at 7:15. Late, as usual. Candace looked like she'd been crying. Her mascara was smudged, and the expensive purse was slung over her shoulder, like she was ready to leave at any second. Brad looked haunted. His shirt was untucked. His eyes darted around my kitchen like he was seeing it for the first time. Sit, I said, pointing to the chairs. I made fresh lemon bars. These ones aren't stale. They sat. Neither of them touched the food. Mom, Brad started. We need to talk about this. The reverse mortgage is going to destroy us. We had plans. We were going to sell this place, buy something smaller for you, and use the rest for the baby. We thought you'd be happy. Happy? I set my cup down. You thought I'd be happy to be shoved into a facility where I'd eat Jell-O and watch Wheel of Fortune with strangers while you lived in my home and spent my money? Is that what you thought happiness looked like for me? Candace's jaw tightened. You can't blame us for wanting a better life. I don't blame you for wanting a better life, I said. I blame you for wanting it at my expense. There's a difference. One is ambition. The other is predation. We're not predators, Brad whispered. Then prove it. I slid a document across the table. Here's what I'm offering. You buy out my life estate interest for fair market value. Martin calculated it based on my improvements and the current market. You pay me that amount, and I'll dissolve the reverse mortgage. I'll move to Florida. The house is yours free and clear. Brad's eyes scanned the paper. His face went pale. This is almost $400,000. That's what my share is worth, I said. I've lived here 37 years. I put on a new roof, a new furnace, a new water heater. I remodeled the kitchen. I landscaped the backyard. That's equity I built. If you want it, you pay for it. We don't have that kind of money, Candace snapped. We don't even have a down payment for a house, and you think we can pay you $400,000? Then you don't get the house, I said. Simple as that. I stay here. You pay the property taxes and the insurance because you're the owner. I keep living here, quietly, for as long as I want. And when I die, the reverse mortgage kicks in and the bank takes the house. That's not fair, Brad said. Neither was walking into my home and demanding I hand over everything I'd worked for, I said. But here we are. Candace stood up so fast her chair scraped the linoleum. This is extortion. You can't do this to us. We're your family. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew she'd lost. She just didn't want to admit it. You're my family, I said. And family takes care of each other. That means you don't push me out. That means you ask, respectfully, and you accept my answer. You didn't ask. You demanded. And this is the consequence. I stood up. I walked to the door and opened it. You have 30 days to decide, I said. Buy me out or I stay. And for the record, I'm very comfortable here. I have my garden. I have my neighbors. I have my lemon bars. I could stay another 30 years. Brad didn't say anything. He just grabbed Candace's arm and led her out the door. She was sputtering something about lawyers and court, but I knew she was bluffing because they'd already talked to a lawyer. And that lawyer would tell them the same thing Martin had told me. A life estate is rock solid. A reverse mortgage executed against a life estate is legal and binding. They had no case that I closed the door and leaned against it. My heart was pounding. I'd faced down my son like he was a stranger. And in some ways he was. That night, I called Martin. They just left. I gave them 30 days. You think they'll take the buyout? I think they have no choice. They can't afford to fight me in court, and they can't afford to wait me out. I'm 64. My mother lived to 98. They're looking at 30 more years of paying taxes on a house they can't live in. Martin laughed. You're a strategic genius, Margaret. I'm just a mother who finally stopped being a doormat. The next few weeks were quiet. Brad called twice, once to yell, once to cry. I listened to both calls. I didn't hang up. I let him pour out his anger and his fear, and when he was done, I repeated my offer. 30 days, Brad. The clock's ticking. Candace never called. I assumed she was too busy trying to figure out how to scrape together $400,000. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to get a loan, but with a baby on the way and a new mortgage on a house they couldn't occupy, no bank was interested. I felt a flicker of pity, but only a flicker, because I remembered that day in my kitchen. The pen skidding across the table. The look in my son's eyes when he told me to sign. He didn't care about my life. He cared about my house. And now he had to decide what mattered more. On day 28, Brad showed up alone. He looked 10 years older. His face was gray, his shoulders slumped. He sat down at my kitchen table without being asked and put his head in his hands. I can't do it, Mom, he said. I can't get the money. Candace's parents won't help, and the banks won't lend to us. We're stuck. I poured him a glass of water. He didn't drink it. You're not stuck, I said. You just have to make peace with the situation. I'm staying here. You'll have to wait. That's not a life. It's the life you chose when you walked in here with those papers, I said. You made a decision. You chose money over your mother. And now you're living with the outcome. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. And the first step to fixing something is admitting you broke it. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was the same hand I'd held when he was a toddler, crossing the street. The same hand I'd held when his father died. The same hand I'd let go when he walked into his college dorm for the first time. "I'll make you another offer," I said. "You don't have to buy me out, but you need to change your behavior. You need to treat me like your mother, not a landlord. You need to visit because you want to, not because you're waiting for my inheritance. And you need to get Candace to apologize. She won't apologize. Then she doesn't come to my house. Simple." Brad stared at me. "You're serious?" "I'm dead serious. I don't need to win. I just need to be respected. And if you and Candace can't give me that, then I'll finish out my days here, alone, and you can wait until I'm cold to move into this house. But I'm not in a hurry. I have good lighting, good neighbors, and I just planted a new rose bush out front. I'm not going anywhere." Brad was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded "Okay, Mom. Okay." He didn't promise anything. He just said, "Okay, but I knew him. I knew my son. And I knew that when he said okay in that voice, it meant he was thinking that I didn't expect a miracle. But I expected a shift. And sometimes that's all you need." 3 months later, Brad showed up with a potted plant and a sheepish smile. "Candace sends her apologies. She's not ready to face you yet, but she wanted you to have this." It was a hydrangea, my favorite. I took the plant and set it on the windowsill. "It's a start." He stayed for dinner. We had pot roast and mashed potatoes. He ate 2 servings. He didn't mention the house. He didn't mention the money. He just talked about his job, about his friends, about the baby kicking inside Candace's belly for the first time in years. It felt like he was my son again. After he left, I called Martin. "He's coming around," I said. Slowly. "But he's coming around. And the house. I'm still living here. I'm still happy. The reverse mortgage is still in place, just in case. But I'm giving him a chance. He's my only son." "That's generous of you." "It's not generous," I said. "It's what mothers do. We give chances. We forgive. We teach. That's the job." Martin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're a good woman, Margaret. A very good woman." "I know," I said. "Now put the Florida condo on the market. I've decided I'm not moving." "What?" "I like it here. My garden is here. My friends are here. And my son might not come every week, but he knows where I am. And he knows I'm not going anywhere." Martin laughed. "Remind me never to play poker with you." "You'd lose," I said. Just like Brad did. I hung up and walked to the window. The hydrangea was already blooming. Blue and pink and purple, reaching toward the sun. I smiled. Sometimes winning doesn't look like winning. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting in her own kitchen, eating her own lemon bars, surrounded by her own things, and a son who finally remembered how to say, "I'm sorry." That's not a loss. That's a victory. 3 weeks after Brad's first visit with a hydrangea, I got a call from Candace. Not a text. Not a message through Brad. She called me. On the phone. Like a grown woman. I almost didn't answer. I saw her name on the caller ID and let it ring twice, maybe 3 times, just to feel the power of choosing. Then I picked up "Hello, Candace." She didn't say hello back. There was a long pause, the kind where you can hear someone trying to find the right words and coming up empty. Then she said, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. I let the apology sit in the air between us, like a guest who wasn't sure if they were welcome. "Yeah. For what?" I asked. She exhaled. It was a shaky sound, the kind that comes from someone who's been holding something heavy for too long. "For coming into your house and treating you like you were in the way. For letting Brad handle it the way he did. For everything." "You let him handle it," I repeated. "That's an interesting way to put it." "Candace, I was there. I saw your face. I saw the way you grabbed those papers and clutched them like a prize. You weren't standing in the background. You were leading the charge. Don't hand that off to Brad now like he acted alone." I waited. She was quiet. I could almost hear her chewing on her pride. "You're right," she finally said. "I pushed him. I told him you'd say yes if he pushed hard enough. I was wrong." "Wrong about what?" "Wrong about you." I thought you were just some old lady who didn't know what she had. I thought you'd be scared. I thought you'd give in. I thought we could walk in, take what we wanted, and walk out. I didn't think you had a plan. Everyone has a plan, Candace. The question is whether it's a good one. Mine was. Yours wasn't. Mom, I stopped. She'd never called me that. Not once in 6 years of marriage to my son. It was always Margaret or Brad's mom, or sometimes just a pointed look. But never, Mom. Yes, I'm scared. I blinked. That was not what I expected. I'd braced for more anger, more excuses, maybe even another threat about lawyers. I hadn't braced for fear. Scared of what? Of losing everything. Of losing Brad. Of having this baby and not being able to give it anything. Of being stuck in that apartment we're renting with the broken dishwasher and the landlord who won't fix anything. I could hear her voice cracking. For a moment, I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. A young woman, barely 30, drowning in expectations she couldn't meet. A woman who'd been raised to believe that the only way up was to climb over anyone in her way. Where are you now? I asked. Home. The apartment. Brad's at work. You want to come over? I just made coffee. I've got lemon bars. A long pause. Then, you're not going to yell at me. I don't yell, I said. I've never yelled. That's not how I operate. I just wait. And eventually people either show up or they don't. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked around my kitchen. It was clean. It was warm. It smelled like vanilla and butter, and the kind of safe that only a home can offer. I put the lemon bars on a plate, fresh ones, because I'd been baking again, and arranged them like a peace offering. She showed up in 17 minutes. No BMW this time. She was driving a 10-year-old sedan with a dented door. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was bare, no makeup, which was surprising because I'd never seen Candace without a full face of cosmetics, not even at 8 a.m. She looked young and tired. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Sit. She walked into the kitchen like she was entering a museum. Carefully, tentatively, she touched the edge of the table, the back of the chair, like she needed to prove to herself it was real. You made lemon bars, she said. I always make lemon bars. She sat down. I poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the table. She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was a life raft. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. And then she cried. Not the theatrical, manipulative tears I'd seen her produce at family gatherings. Real ones. Ugly ones. The kind that make your nose run and your eyes swell. I handed her a napkin and let her cry when she was done. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted a life. A real life. With a house and a yard and a nursery that wasn't in the corner of a bedroom we can barely fit a crib into. I understand wanting a life, I said. I wanted one too. That's why I worked double shifts. That's why I saved. That's why I set up the trust and the life estate and everything else. Because I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away. I didn't know about the trust. Brad didn't either. I know. That was intentional. I was protecting myself. And I'm not sorry about that. She nodded slowly. I shouldn't have pushed him to do it. He didn't want to at first. He kept saying we should talk to you, ask you politely, give you time. I told him that was weak. I told him you'd never agree if we gave you time to think. And what do you think now? She looked at me. I think we should have asked. I think I was wrong about everything. I think I'm a terrible person. I don't believe that, I said. I think you're a desperate person. There's a difference. Desperation makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. It makes you think the only way to get ahead is to take from other people. But that's not true. The only way to really get ahead is to build something yourself. And sometimes you can build it with other people instead of on top of them. She wiped her eyes. Is there any way we can fix this? I leaned back in my chair. That depends on what you mean by fix. I mean the house. The reverse mortgage. All of it. Is there any way to undo what we did? You want to undo it. I want to not be the person who did it. I considered that. It was the most honest thing Candace had ever said to me. Here's the thing about the reverse mortgage, I said. It's not gone. It's still filed. It's still registered against the property. But I can dissolve it if I choose to. I can release the lien. I can let you and Brad have the house free and clear. Her eyes widened. I can. But I'm not going to do it for free. She tensed. I could see the walls going back up. I don't have money. I'm not asking for money. I paused. I'm asking for something harder. What treat me like family. Not like an obstacle. Not like a problem to be solved. Like family. That means you come over for dinner. You bring the baby when it's born. You let me be a grandmother. You let me into your life not because you want something from me, but because I'm your husband's mother and that matters. Candace stared at me. That's it. That's it. She started crying again. Not ugly crying this time. Something softer. Something that looked a lot like relief. I can do that, she said. I can definitely do that. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold and trembling. I held it until she stopped shaking. Then we have a deal, I said. But I'm keeping the reverse mortgage in place as a safety net. Just in case. You don't trust me. Not yet. But I'm willing to learn. She nodded. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where we hugged and sang songs. But it was a start. Later that week, I called Brad. He answered on the first ring. Mom, your wife came to see me, I said. We talked. She apologized. She told me. She came home and told me everything. And I'm sorry too. I should never have done that. I should never have walked into your house with those papers. I was wrong. I was selfish. I thought I was doing the right thing for my family, but I was doing the wrong thing to my mother. I let that land. It was the closest he'd come to taking responsibility. It felt real. I'm not going to punish you forever, I said. That's not what mothers do. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either. We're going to move forward. But we're moving forward on my terms. What are your terms? Simple. You and Candace come to dinner once a week. You bring the baby when it's born. You don't ask me for money, and you don't treat me like a retirement account. You treat me like your mother. I can do that. And Brad, I want you to understand something. I worked hard for what I have. Your father worked hard. We didn't get anything handed to us. And it hurts that you tried to take what we built instead of asking for help in building something of your own. I know. I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. Now come over for dinner on Sunday. I'm making pot roast. He laughed. It was a real laugh. I'll be there. That Sunday, they showed up together. Candace brought a pie from the bakery down the street. Her contribution, she said, because she wanted to bring something. Brad brought a 6-pack of root beer, which was his father's favorite. We sat around the table. We ate pot roast and mashed potatoes and green beans. We talked about the baby. They were having a girl. They'd already picked out a name, Lily. After my grandmother, Candace said. She was the only person in my family who ever believed in me. I smiled. Lily's a beautiful name. For the first time in months, my house felt like a home again. Not a battleground. Not a bank vault. A home that after dinner, I took Brad aside. I want to give you something. He looked nervous. What? I handed him an envelope. Open it later. When you're alone. He put it in his pocket. I could see him fighting the urge to open it right there, but he respected my request. Later that night, I got a call from him. He was crying. Mom, this is too much. I can't accept this. It's not a gift, I said. It's an investment. Inside the envelope was a check. $52,000. And a letter explaining what it was for. You have to match it, I said. I'm giving you $50,000, and you have to save $50,000 of your own. For the baby's college fund. I'll put it in a 529 plan in my name, with Lily as the beneficiary. You add to it every year. When she's 18, it'll be enough to send her anywhere she wants to go. But you're all ready. I'm giving you a head start. Not a handout. A head start. You and Candace still have to work. You still have to save. But I'm giving you a chance to do something better than what you tried to do before. He was quiet for a long time. Then, Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve this. Maybe not.
But you're my son.
And I believe people can change. Prove me right. That was 6 months ago. Lily was born 3 weeks ago. She's perfect. Small and pink and wrinkly, with a head of dark hair and eyes that already look curious about the world. I held her yesterday. Candace handed her to me with a smile that was genuine, not forced. She said, "You're the first person we wanted to meet her. After us, I mean." I rocked the baby in my arms and felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Hope.
Not just for her, but for all of us that I still live in the house on Maple Street. I still have the garden and the neighbors and the lemon bars.
But I also have a granddaughter now.
I have a son who calls just to talk, not to ask for things. I have a daughter-in-law who brings me coffee when she's in the neighborhood. And I have the reverse mortgage still sitting quietly in the background. Not as a weapon, as insurance. Because I've learned that trust isn't a gift you give away all at once. It's a garden you grow over time. You water it. You weed it. And you hope the frost doesn't come too early. Martin asked me last week if I'd ever dissolve the reverse mortgage entirely. I told him, maybe, when I'm sure. Of what? That we've all learned the lesson.
He laughed.
What lesson is that? I thought about it. About Brad's face when I signed those papers. About Candace's apology in my kitchen. About Lily's tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb. The lesson that you can't take shortcuts to a good life, I said. You have to build it. Slowly.
Carefully.
And with the people who matter. Martin nodded. That's a good lesson. It is, I said. And it took me 64 years to learn it myself. I hung up the phone and walked to the front porch. The hydrangea had bloomed again. Bigger this time. Blue and pink and purple, like a promise that I rocked in my chair and watched the sun go down. Somewhere inside, Lily was crying, and Candace was singing to her. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. The peace lasted exactly 4 months. That it was a Tuesday. I was in the garden, knee-deep in tomato vines, when I heard the car pull into the driveway. Not Brad's BMW. Not Candace's dented sedan. Something bigger. Louder. An engine that rumbled like it was angry at the world. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stood up. The sun was hot on my neck. I squinted toward the driveway and felt my stomach drop. It was a black SUV. Brand new. Tinted windows. And behind the wheel, staring at me through the glass like a hawk watching a field mouse, was Candace's mother. Patricia, and I hadn't seen Patricia in 4 years. Not since the Christmas dinner where she'd made a comment about my modest little bungalow and asked if I'd ever considered downsizing to something more appropriate for your stage of life. She was a woman who wore designer clothes to the grocery store and talked about her investment portfolio like it was a beloved pet. She stepped out of the SUV in heels that sank into my lawn. Her hair was a helmet of blonde perfection. Her sunglasses cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "What a charming little garden you have. So rustic." "Patricia." I didn't move. I didn't offer to shake her hand. I stayed right where I was, with dirt under my nails and sweat on my forehead. "What brings you to my side of town?" she smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Can a grandmother check on her granddaughter?" "She can. But you've never once asked about Lily since she was born. So, I'm guessing this isn't a social call." Patricia's smile tightened. She walked toward me carefully, like she was afraid of getting dirt on her shoes. "Let's not play games, Margaret. We both know why I'm here. Enlighten me." She stopped a few feet away and crossed her arms. "You've been manipulating my daughter. You've been controlling my son-in-law. You've been holding that house over their heads like a threat. And I've had enough." I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had been underestimated one too many times. "Manipulating Patricia, I sat in my kitchen while your daughter screamed at me to sign over my house. I signed. I didn't fight. I didn't yell. I just made a plan to protect myself. If that's manipulation, then call me a master." "Don't be cute. You know what you did. You trapped them. You put a reverse mortgage on a house they now own. You made it impossible for them to sell or refinance. And then you dangled a buyout like a carrot and made them grovel for it." I made them pay fair market value for something they wanted to take for free, I said. That's not trapping. That's business. This isn't business. Patricia's voice went sharp. This is family. And family doesn't do what you did. I took a step closer. I was shorter than her, but I didn't feel small. Family doesn't what, Patricia? Demand their mother's house, threaten to put her in a home, treat her like she's in the way, because that's exactly what your daughter did. And from what I can tell, she learned it from you. Patricia's face went red. How dare you? I dare because I've had enough. I've been a widow for 8 years. I've been alone for 8 years. And in that time, I've watched my son get married to a woman who never once called me mom until she wanted something. I've watched her parents treat me like I'm irrelevant. And I've watched my son slowly turn into someone I don't recognize. So forgive me if I'm not interested in your opinions about what I should or shouldn't do with my property. Patricia stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in our acquaintance, she seemed speechless. You know what I think? I continued. I think you came here to bully me into giving up the reverse mortgage. I think you want me to roll over and let your daughter have everything she wants, because that's what you've always done for her. You've given her everything. And now she expects the world to give her everything too.
But the world doesn't work that way.
And neither do I. You're making a mistake, Patricia said. I have lawyers. I have resources. I can make your life very difficult. You think I'm afraid of lawyers? I laughed again. Patricia, I've been working with Martin for 15 years. He's the best estate attorney in the county. He's already looked at every angle of this situation, and he's told me the reverse mortgage is ironclad. You can't touch it. You can't challenge it. You can't undo it without my consent. So go ahead. Call your lawyers. Waste your money. I'll be here in my garden, picking tomatoes. I turned my back on her. I walked to the tomato vine and started picking. I could feel her staring at me, burning holes in my back. Margaret. I didn't turn around. This isn't over. It's over for today, I said. You can see yourself out. Watch your heels on the grass. I heard her huff. I heard her footsteps stomping back to the SUV. The engine roared to life, and the black beast pulled out of my driveway with a sound like a wounded animal. I stood there, holding a tomato in my hand, and let myself shake. I hadn't realized how much that confrontation had taken out of me until she was gone. My hands were trembling. My heart was racing. But I'd stood my ground and I walked inside and called Martin. She came, I said. Candace's mother. Patricia. Just left. How did it go? I stood my ground. She threatened lawyers. I told her to bring them on. Martin was quiet for a moment. Margaret, I need to be honest with you. She could be a problem. Patricia Barkley is well-connected. She has money. She has influence. If she decides to make this a fight, she could cause a lot of trouble. What kind of trouble? She could challenge the life estate. She could argue that you signed the quitclaim under duress. She could try to prove you weren't of sound mind when you executed the reverse mortgage. But I was. I am. I've never been more sound in my life. I know that, Martin said. And I can prove it. But it's still going to be a fight. It's still going to cost money and time and energy. Are you ready for that? I looked around my kitchen. The lemon bars were cooling on the counter. The hydrangea was blooming in the window. Outside, the sun was shining and the tomatoes were ripening and everything I loved was right here. I'm ready, I said. I've been ready for 15 years. Let them come. That night, Brad called. He sounded panicked. Mom, my mother-in-law just called Candace. She said you threatened her. She said you told her to stay away from your property. I didn't threaten her, I said. I told her the truth. I told her the reverse mortgage is legal and binding. I told her I wasn't going to be bullied. If she felt threatened by that, that's on her. Mom, she's going to sue you. She can try. I have Martin. He's been waiting for this. He's practically giddy about it. Brad was quiet. Then he said, I don't want this to get ugly. Then tell your mother-in-law to back off. I can't control her. She's Candace's mother. Candace can't even control her. Then I guess you're all going to have to find a way to live with the consequences of her choices. Just like I've had to live with the consequences of yours. He didn't have an answer for that. He just said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want any of this." I know, but it's happening anyway. So we deal with it. I hung up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was something else. Something that felt like steel. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. Certified mail. It was from Patricia's law firm. They were challenging the reverse mortgage. They were challenging the life estate. They were demanding a competency hearing. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Martin. "It's happening," I said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just tell me what to do." "First thing, don't panic. Second thing, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. I have a plan. And Margaret, yes, you're going to win. I promise you." The next morning, I drove to Martin's office. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I walked in like I owned the place because, in a way, I did. I was paying Martin's bills. I was calling the shots. He had a stack of documents on his desk. "Here's what we're going to do. Patricia's lawyers are arguing that you lacked capacity when you executed the reverse mortgage. They're also arguing that the life estate was invalid because it wasn't properly recorded." Was it properly recorded? Absolutely. I handled it myself, but we need to prove that. So, I'm going to have you evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist. Not because I think you need it, because it will make it impossible for them to argue against you. They'll think I'm crazy. They'll think you're competent, which is exactly what we need. A psychiatrist's evaluation, done at your home, will establish that you were of sound mind when you did everything you did. And if they try to argue otherwise, they'll look foolish. Do it. Martin nodded. Also, and this is the part one don't think you're going to like, I want you to invite Patricia to a mediation. A sit-down meeting. Face to face. Why would I do that? Because it makes you look reasonable. It makes her look aggressive if she refuses. And it might actually resolve some of this without a judge getting involved. I thought about it. I thought about Patricia's heels sinking into my lawn. I thought about her voice, dripping with condescension. I thought about all the years I'd let people like her talk down to me without saying a word. "Set it up," I said. "I'll be there. I'll handle the rest." The mediation was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, the psychiatrist came to my house. He was a calm, silver-haired man named Dr. Chin. He asked me questions about my memory, my daily routine, my finances. I answered all of them without hesitation. "Mrs. O'Connor," he said at the end, "you are one of the sharpest people I've evaluated in years. Your memory is excellent. Your reasoning is sound. You have a clear understanding of your assets and the documents you've signed. There is no question in my mind that you are completely competent." I smiled. "I could have told you that for free." He laughed. "I'll have the report filed with the court by the end of the week." The day of the mediation, I dressed in a blue blazer and pearl earrings. The same ones I'd worn to my husband's funeral. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to look like a woman who couldn't be moved. The mediation was held at a neutral office downtown. Patricia was already there when I arrived. She was dressed in an expensive black suit, and her lawyer sat beside her like a guard dog. Her expression was icy. Martin sat beside me. He placed my file on the table and smiled at Patricia's lawyer. "Good afternoon, Mr. Henderson." "Martin." The other lawyer nodded stiffly. The mediator was a woman named Elaine. She had a calm voice and kind eyes. "Thank you both for coming. I know this has been difficult for everyone, but I hope we can find a resolution today." Patricia spoke first. "This shouldn't be difficult. Mrs. O'Connor manipulated my daughter and son-in-law into a situation they didn't understand. She took advantage of their trust. And she used legal technicalities to trap them into an impossible position." I didn't respond. I just looked at her with a calm expression and let her talk. "We're asking the court to invalidate the reverse mortgage and the life estate," Patricia continued. "We want the property returned to Brad and Candace free and clear. And we want Margaret to pay for the legal fees we've incurred." "Mrs. O'Connor," Elaine said. "What's your response?" I took a breath. I'd thought about this moment for weeks. I'd imagined what I'd say, how I'd say it, and what I wanted to feel when I walked out. "Patricia, I understand you want to protect your daughter," I said. "But you're wrong about what happened. I didn't manipulate anyone. I responded to a threat. My son and his wife walked into my home and demanded I sign over my house. They didn't ask. They demanded. And they did it in a way that made it clear they didn't care about me. They just cared about my property. That's not true. It is true. And I have witnesses. Mrs. Henderson from next door heard Brad yelling through the windows. She told me she almost called the police. Patricia's face went pale. She obviously hadn't known about the neighbor. I signed those papers because I knew I had other options. I continued. I had a life estate. I had a trust. I had a plan that I'd put in place years ago, not because I expected this to happen, but because I wanted to protect myself. I didn't set out to trap anyone. I just refused to be a victim. Elaine nodded. Mrs. O'Connor, what would you be willing to accept as a resolution today? I turned to Patricia. I'll dissolve the reverse mortgage. I'll release the property to Brad and Candace free and clear. But only if you agree to 3 conditions. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What conditions? First, you and your lawyer will withdraw all legal challenges.
No competency hearings. No motions. No delays.
You will let this end. Patricia didn't respond. Her lawyer wrote something on a notepad. Second, Brad and Candace will sign an agreement that I have the right to live in that house for as long as I choose. They won't try to evict me. They won't pressure me to leave. I will be treated as a tenant with full rights. That's already covered by the life estate. If it's already covered, then you should have no problem signing it. Patricia pressed her lips together. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. Third, I said, you will apologize.
To me.
Right here. For trying to break down my door with your lawyers and your threats. I'm not apologizing. Then we're done. I stood up. Martin stood with me. Wait. Patricia's voice was sharp. She looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been disbelief. You're serious. I'm always serious, Patricia. That's one thing you should have learned about me by now. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she exhaled and said, I'm sorry. Sorry for what? Sorry for trying to intimidate you. Sorry for sending those letters. Sorry for underestimating you. I sat back down. Thank you. That wasn't so hard, was it? Patricia didn't laugh. But something in her face had changed. She looked less like a predator and more like a woman who had just realized she'd been fighting the wrong battle. We spent the rest of the afternoon drafting the agreement. Martin handled the legal language. I watched him work with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who'd been planning this victory for years. By 5 o'clock, everything was signed. The reverse mortgage would be dissolved within 60 days. The life estate would remain in place, with an additional lease agreement that gave me clear rights as a resident. And all legal challenges were withdrawn. Patricia shook my hand before she left. You're a tough woman, Margaret. Thank you. I still don't like you. I don't need you to like me. I just need you to stay out of my way. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she walked out with her lawyer. I drove home with the windows down and the radio on. I felt lighter than I'd felt in years. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. For the first time in a long time, I believed that everything was going to be okay. When I got home, Brad was waiting on my porch. He looked scared. Mom, is it over? It's over, I said. The reverse mortgage is going away. The house is yours eventually, but I'm staying. And your mother-in-law has been put on notice. He stood up and hugged me. It was the first real hug he'd given me since the day he'd stormed in with those papers. His arms were tight around me, and I felt the tension in his shoulders. I'm so sorry, he whispered. For everything. I know, I said. Come inside. I made lemon bars. That night, we sat in the kitchen and talked. Not about the house. Not about the money. Not about the legal drama. We talked about his childhood. About his father. About the memories we'd made in that house, and the ones we still wanted to make. And for a few hours, it felt like we were a family again. The next morning, I got another call. It was Martin. Patricia's lawyer just dropped the lawsuit. I know. I was there. Good. I just wanted to tell you, you handled that better than any client I've ever had. Most people would have caved. Most people would have settled for less. You didn't. I had a good teacher, I said. David used to say, never negotiate against yourself. I remembered that. David was a smart man. He was. But he also had a smart wife. Martin laughed. That he did. So, what's next for you, Margaret? I looked out the window at my garden, my house, my life. The sun was bright, and the hydrangea was in full bloom. Next, I said, I think I'll have some lemon bars and enjoy the rest of my day. I've got a granddaughter to spoil, a garden to tend, and a whole lot of years left to live. That's enough. The reverse mortgage was dissolved 60 days later, just like Martin promised. The paperwork went through, the liens were released, and the house on Maple Street was officially free and clear. Brad and Candace owned it on paper. I owned the right to live in it until I died or chose to leave. That was the deal. But deals have a way of shifting when people start to feel comfortable. And comfort, I was learning, was a dangerous thing. Did it started small? A comment here, a suggestion there. Candace mentioned that they'd love to paint the nursery pink, but they didn't want to disturb my routine. I told them to paint it whatever color they wanted. The room wasn't being used anyway, and I was happy with my bedroom at the end of the hall. Then Brad mentioned that they'd found a great deal on a swing set for the backyard.
Could they install it?
Of course, I said. The yard is big enough, and I liked the idea of hearing Lily laugh outside. Then the requests got bigger. Mom, we were thinking about redoing the kitchen. Modernize it. Open concept. We could put in an island, maybe take down that wall between the kitchen and the dining room. I set my coffee cup down. That wall has been there for 40 years. I know, but it's so outdated. It's dark and cramped. We want to make it brighter, more functional. I like it the way it is. Brad didn't push, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. And that disappointment, I knew, was the beginning of something. A few weeks later, Candace came over with a binder full of paint samples and fabric swatches. I was thinking about the living room, she said, spreading them across my table. We could do a soft gray, maybe with an accent wall. And I found these beautiful curtains at Pottery Barn. They'd match perfectly. The walls are cream, I said. They've always been cream. Your father picked that color. I know, but cream is so what's so boring? I looked at her. She was trying to be diplomatic, I could tell. But there was an edge to her voice that I recognized. It was the same edge she'd had the day she walked into my house with those papers. You want to change my house? I said, our house, she corrected. Technically, we're the owners now. We're just trying to make it feel like ours, too. I felt my chest tighten. It was a small distinction, but it cut deep. Our house. Not your house. Not the house your mother lives in. Our house. I'm not ready for major changes, I said. Maybe we can revisit this in a few months. Candace smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Whatever you're comfortable with. She packed up her samples and left. I watched her walk to her car, and I noticed that the dented sedan was gone. She was driving a new minivan now.
Red. Top of the line.
It must have cost at least $40,000. I wondered where the money had come from. Then I wondered why I was wondering. Because I knew. Brad had gotten a promotion 6 months ago. He was making more money now. And apparently, Candace had decided it was time to spend it. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the mother who criticized her son's spending habits. But I also didn't want to be the mother who got pushed out of her own home one paint swatch at a time. 2 weeks later, I came home from the grocery store to find a construction crew in my backyard. I set my bags down on the porch and walked around to the back. There were men in hard hats digging holes in my lawn. A pile of lumber was stacked against the fence. And Candace was standing in the middle of it all, pointing at the ground like she was directing traffic. What is this? I asked. Candace turned around. She looked surprised to see me, but not apologetic. Oh, hey. We decided to go ahead with the swing set. Brad ordered it online, and the installation guys showed up this morning. I didn't know you were doing this today. I tried to call you. You didn't answer. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There were no missed calls. I didn't get a call. I said, must have been a glitch. She shrugged. Anyway, it's no big deal. It's just a swing set. Lily will love it. I looked at the holes in my lawn. They were deep. The swing set was going to be permanent. It was going to take up a significant chunk of the backyard. You should have asked me. I said, why it's our backyard too. I felt something shift inside me. It was the same feeling I'd had when Brad first slammed those papers on my kitchen table. The feeling of being dismissed. Of being treated like an obstacle instead of a person. I need you to stop, I said. Right now. Candace's face went cold. Stop what? Stop making changes to my house without asking me. I don't care who owns the deed. I live here. I've lived here for almost 40 years. And I have the right to be consulted before you dig holes in my lawn. The swing set is for your granddaughter. Then you should have asked me. And you should have accepted my answer, whatever it was. The construction workers had stopped digging. They were watching us, unsure what to do. Candace looked at them, then at me. Her jaw was tight. Fine, she said. I'll cancel the installation. But this isn't over. It's over for today, I said. She walked away, pulling out her phone as she went. I heard her talking to Brad, her voice sharp and clipped. I didn't try to listen to the words. I'd heard enough. That night, I sat in my rocking chair and thought about the last few months. I'd won the legal battle. I'd kept my house. I'd forced Patricia to back down. But was that really winning? Because I still felt like I was fighting. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. Every visit felt like a potential conflict. I called Martin. I need advice. I said, what kind of advice? Advice on how to set boundaries without starting World War III. He was quiet for a moment. Margaret, you've been fighting so long. You might have forgotten that you're allowed to say no. Not just legally, emotionally. You're allowed to decide what you're comfortable with. And you're allowed to enforce those boundaries, even if people get upset. What if they get so upset they stop visiting? Then they stop visiting. And you learn who actually cares about you versus who just cares about your property. I thought about that for a long time. It was harsh. But it was also true that the next day I called Brad. I asked him to come over alone. He came that evening, looking tired and wary. Mom, what's going on? Candace told me about the swing set. She said you embarrassed her in front of the workers. I didn't embarrass her, I said. I asked her to stop making changes to my house without asking me. That's not embarrassing. That's reasonable. She thought you'd be excited about the swing set. Lily loves swings. Lily is 6 months old. She doesn't know what a swing is. This isn't about Lily. This is about boundaries. And I need you both to respect mine. Brad sat down heavily in the chair across from me. Mom, we're just trying to make the house feel like ours. We're not trying to push you out. We're just trying to make it a home for our family. This is my home, I said. It's been my home for 37 years. And I'm not done with it yet. I know. That's why we're trying to work with you. Then work with me, not around me. That's the difference, Brad. When you make decisions without including me, you're working around me. And that's not what family does. He looked at me with something that might have been shame. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. I should have talked to you first. Thank you. We'll cancel the swing set. We'll wait until you're ready. I didn't say I'd never be ready. I said I wanted to be asked. That's all. He nodded. Okay, I'll talk to Candace. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't, because Candace wasn't the kind of person who accepted no gracefully. She was the kind of person who found other ways to get what she wanted. And a few weeks later, I discovered that she'd found one. I was putting away groceries when I noticed something on the counter. A business card. It was from a real estate agent named Karen Whitfield. I picked it up and turned it over. Karen Whitfield, Keller Williams Realty. Specializing in retirement transitions and estate sales. My hand started to shake. I called the number on the card. Karen Whitfield. Hello, my name is Margaret O'Connor. I found your card in my kitchen. I was wondering if you could tell me who gave it to you. There was a pause. I'm sorry, I can't disclose client information without. Let me rephrase, I said. My daughter-in-law is named Candace. Did she hire you to appraise my house? Another pause. Longer this time, it really can't. Karen, I'm the one who owns the life estate on this property. Legally, you cannot do a valuation without my consent. So let me ask you again. Did Candace hire you? The line was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, yes, but I assumed she had the authority to. She doesn't. And if you do any work on this property without my written consent, I will report you to the State Real Estate Board for ethical violations. I hung up and I stood in my kitchen with my heart pounding. Candace had tried to get the house appraised.
She was planning something.
She was trying to figure out how much the property was worth, probably so she could pressure me into selling my interest. She thought she could outmaneuver me, but she was wronged. That evening I called Martin to send a letter to Brad and Candace. I said, "Certified mail. They need to know that I'm aware of the appraisal attempt and that any further action without my consent will be met with legal resistance." That's strong, Margaret. I know, but they need to understand that I'm not going to be steamrolled. Not ever again. Martin agreed to draft the letter. It went out the next day. I didn't hear from Brad for a week. When he finally called, his voice was strained. "Mom, what's going on? We got a letter for Martin." "I know. I asked him to send it." "Why, Candace isn't trying to do anything. She hired a real estate agent to appraise my house. Behind my back."
She didn't tell me. She didn't ask.
"She just did it." Brad was silent. I could hear him breathing. "Did you know about it?" I asked. "No. I didn't know. She didn't tell me." "Then you need to ask her why. And you need to set some boundaries of your own." "I'm not going to. You need to decide whose side you're on. Because right now, it feels like you're on hers. And that's fine, if that's what you want. But if you're on her side, you can't be on mine." "Mom, you're making this into a war." "I'm not making it into a war. I'm just telling you that I won't be treated like an enemy in my own home. And if that's how things are going to be, I need to know."
He was quiet for a long time.
Then he said, "I'll talk to her." "Do that." I hung up. My hands were steady. I was no longer shaking. I'd been through enough battles to know that fear was a choice. And I was choosing not to be afraid. A few days later, Candace showed up at my house. She didn't call first. She just knocked on my door and stood there with her arms crossed and her face hard. "Are you going to let me in?" she asked. "That depends on why you're here." She stared at me for a moment. Then her face softened, not into warmth, but into something like resignation. "To apologize." I stepped aside. She walked in and sat at the kitchen table without being invited. I poured her a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "I talked to Martin," I said. "I know what you tried to do. I shouldn't have done it. I know that. I just wanted to see how much the house was worth. I thought maybe we could sell it and use the money to buy something bigger. Something we could all live in together. Including me, yes. Including you. I thought you might want to move. The house is old, and it needs work. I thought maybe you'd be ready to downsize." "You thought wrong." She nodded. "Clearly." "Let me tell you something," I said. "I'm not leaving this house until I'm ready. And I'm not ready. I may never be ready. That's what the life estate means. It means I get to choose."
Not you.
"Not Brad."
Me.
"I get it. Do you, because you haven't acted like it? You've been pushing and pushing, trying to make this house yours before I'm gone. And I'm not gone yet." She looked at me with something that might have been recognition. "I know."
I'm sorry.
I get scared. I get scared that we'll never have what we want. That we'll be stuck in that apartment forever. That Lily will grow up without a yard to play in. I want so much for her that I forget to see you." That was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. And for the first time, I saw past the hard edges. I saw the woman underneath. The frightened woman who was trying to claw her way to something better. "I was where you were once," I said. "I had a baby and a small apartment and not enough money. I was scared all the time. But I didn't try to take from anyone else. I built my own life.
Slowly.
Painfully. One step at a time. I don't know if I can do that." "You can. But you have to stop trying to take shortcuts." She nodded. I could see the wheels turning in her head. "So, what do we do now?" I considered for a moment. Then I said, "We start over. We don't talk about the house for the rest of the year. We just talk about Lily and family, and all the normal things. We bake lemon bars together. We eat dinner together. We become a family again. Just like that, just like that. No conditions. No agendas. Just family." She reached out and touched my hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The weeks that followed were better. Not perfect. Nothing is ever perfect, but better. Candace stopped bringing paint samples and real estate cards. Brad stopped asking about renovations. They showed up for dinner on Sundays, and they stayed to do the dishes that we talked about Lily's first steps, her first words, her first everything.
We laughed. We argued, sometimes.
But the arguments were small. The kind of arguments families have over who gets the last slice of pie. And gradually, I started to relax. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could heal. I called Martin less often. I stopped checking the mail for legal notices. I let myself think about things other than boundaries and legal rights. Then one day, I came home from a doctor's appointment to find a moving truck in front of my house. My blood turned cold. I parked my car on the street and walked toward the house. There were men carrying boxes into the house. Furniture. Mattresses. Bins labeled Lily. I walked through the front door. The living room was full of boxes. And Candace was standing in the middle of it, directing the movers. "What is this?" I asked. Candace turned around. She was smiling.
Surprise.
We decided to move in.
Isterte her.
You're moving in without asking me. We talked about it. Remember we said we'd talk about renovations later. This is just temporary. Temporary, just until we find a place. We've been looking, but the market is crazy. We thought we'd stay here for a while. Use the spare rooms. Help out with the house. You didn't ask me. I thought you'd be happy. We'd be together as a family. Lily would get to see you every day. Isn't that what you wanted? I looked around the living room. Their things were everywhere. Their furniture was blocking the windows. Their bins were stacked against the wall. The house I'd lived in for almost 40 years was suddenly not mine anymore. I felt the walls closing in, and I walked past Candace and went to my bedroom. I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I called Martin. They moved in, I said. Candace moved her family into my house without asking me. They're in the living room. Their stuff is everywhere. Martin was quiet for a moment. Margaret, that's a violation of the life estate agreement. I know. You have the legal right to have them removed. I know that too. But I don't want to do that. I want them to leave on their own. Martin sighed. Then you need to have a conversation. A firm one. You need to tell them they have 30 days to find another place, and if they don't, you'll pursue legal action.
Can I do that legally? Yes.
They have no right to occupy the property without your consent. But Margaret, this is going to cause a lot of friction. I know. Are you ready for that? I thought about it. I thought about my son's face. I thought about my granddaughter's laugh. I thought about all the hours I'd spent fighting to protect my home, and all the hours I'd spent trying to rebuild my family. I'm ready, I said. I'll talk to them tonight. I hung up and waited. I heard the moving truck drive away. I heard Candace calling out instructions to Brad. I heard Lily crying somewhere in the distance. I waited until the house was quiet. Then I opened my bedroom door and walked out. Brad was in the kitchen, trying to assemble a crib. Candace was unpacking dishes in the dining room. They looked up when I walked in. Mom, isn't this great? Brad said. We're all going to be together. I sat down at the kitchen table. We need to talk. Brad looked at Candace. She looked at him. They both sat down. You can't stay here, I said. I know you're excited. I know you want to be together. But you can't move into my house without asking me. That's not how this works. Mom, we're just trying to. I know what you're trying to do. And I understand it. But this is my home. I've lived here for 37 years. And I need you to respect that. Candace's face went pale. You're kicking us out. I'm asking you to leave. I'm giving you 30 days to find another place. If you need help with a down payment or first month's rent, I'll help you. But you can't stay here. Brad looked devastated. Mom, please, I'm not going to let this happen again, I said. I was patient with the paint samples. I was patient with the swing set. I was patient with the appraisal. But moving in without asking me, that's too far. And I need you to understand that there are consequences. Candace stood up. You can't do this. This is our house too.
No.
It's not. You have the deed. I have the life estate. And that means I have the right to live here without interference. Moving in without asking is interference. She glared at me. I could see the anger boiling in her eyes. But I also saw something else. Recognition. She knew she'd crossed a line. "Let's go," she said to Brad. "We'll stay with my parents." Brad didn't argue. He just looked at me with sad eyes, grabbed his keys, and followed her out. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat in my empty kitchen and listened to the silence. It was a lonely silence, but it was also a peaceful one that I didn't know if they'd ever forgive me. I didn't know if our family could survive this. But I knew I'd done the right thing, because sometimes protecting your peace means being the bad guy. And I was okay with that. The 30 days came and went. Brad and Candace didn't move back in. They stayed with Patricia, which I knew was a special kind of hell for both of them. I didn't call. I didn't check in. I gave them the space they needed, and I gave myself the space I needed too. But I wasn't alone. Not really. Lily came to visit every Saturday. Brad would drop her off in the morning and pick her up in the evening. Candace never came with him. I didn't ask why. I just took the time I had with my granddaughter and made the most of it. We baked together. Well, I baked and she sat in her high chair and smashed flour into her hair. We played in the garden. She pulled up my petunias and I planted them again. She laughed when I chased her around the yard, and I laughed too. It was the simplest joy I'd felt in years. But I knew it couldn't last forever. Eventually, we have to talk about what happened. Eventually, Brad and Candace would have to decide what kind of family they wanted to be. I got my answer on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, drinking iced tea, and watching the robins fight over a worm in the grass, when a car pulled into the driveway. It wasn't Brad's BMW. It wasn't Candace's minivan. It was a small, beat-up sedan I'd never seen before. A young woman got out. She was maybe 25, with dark hair and tired eyes. She was holding a toddler on her hip, a little boy with the same dark hair and the same tired eyes. "Mrs. O'Connor," she called. I stood up. "That's me. My name is Rachel. I'm Brad's half-sister." I felt the world tilt. "I don't have a half-sister." "You don't. Brad does. His father, your husband, had another family. Before you." I thought about David, the man I'd been married to for 35 years. The man who held my hand when I gave birth to Brad. The man who promised to love and cherish me until death did us part. Before me, I repeated, when he was young. He was married before, but it didn't last. He had a daughter, my mother. He left when she was 2. He never came back. But she knew who he was. And when she died, she told me the truth. I sat down heavily on the porch steps. My iced tea slipped from my hand and spilled onto the grass. I didn't care that she died. I asked, "Last year. Cancer." She left me a box of letters from him. "From your husband. He wrote to her, for years." She never wrote back. She said he didn't deserve the satisfaction. But she kept the letters anyway. She never could let go. I felt something break inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Something deeper. A crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Rachel shifted the toddler on her hip. The boy was staring at me with wide, curious eyes. "Because I need help. I'm in trouble. I'm living in my car with my son. My mother left me nothing. And I don't have anywhere else to go. I thought maybe you could help me. Since we're family." "Family," I echoed. The word felt strange in my mouth. I know it's a lot to ask. I know you don't know me. But I'm desperate. And I saw the address in one of the letters. I thought if I came here, maybe. She stopped, her voice catching. The toddler started to squirm, and she bounced him gently on her hip. I looked at her. I looked at the little boy. I thought about David, the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted with everything. And I thought about the secret he'd kept from me for 35 years. I should have been angry. I should have slammed the door in her face. I should have told her I had nothing to do with her or her mother or the man who'd lied to me for decades. But I didn't, because I saw myself in her.
I saw the woman I used to be. Young, desperate, alone.
"Come inside," I said. She looked surprised. Really? But I'm not making any promises. I don't know if I can help you. But I can't leave you out here with a baby in this heat." She followed me inside. I made her sit down at the kitchen table. I gave her water and a snack for the toddler. And I listened as she told me everything. Her mother had been born when David was just 22. He'd left her mother when she was 2, walked out with nothing but a duffel bag. He'd never paid child support. He'd never acknowledged her publicly. But he'd written letters.
Dozens of them.
Apologizing, explaining, begging for forgiveness. He said he was young, Rachel said. He said he made mistakes. He said he'd always loved her, even if he couldn't be there. David had never told me any of this. In 35 years of marriage, he'd never once mentioned that he had another daughter. He'd never mentioned a first marriage. He'd never mentioned anything. I thought about all the nights he'd come home late from work, all the times he'd gone on business trips, all the phone calls he'd stepped outside to take. I'd trusted him. I'd never questioned him. And now I was sitting in my kitchen with the granddaughter of his first daughter, trying to figure out what to do. Do you want anything from him? I asked. From me? Rachel shook her head. I don't want his money. I don't want his legacy.
I just want a second chance.
A place to get on my feet. I'm not asking to stay here forever. Just long enough to find a job, get an apartment, get my life together. What about Brad? Have you told him? No. I was going to, but then I heard about the house and the legal stuff. It seemed like a bad time. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. It's always a bad time with Brad. But that's not a reason to avoid the truth. I looked at the little boy. He was playing with a spoon on the table, banging it against the wood like a drum. He looked happy. Content. He didn't know that his whole world was about to change. What's his name? I asked. Leo. I reached out and touched his hand. He looked up at me and smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real, and in that moment I knew what I had to do. That I didn't have to forgive David. I didn't have to forget the secrets he'd kept. But I didn't have to punish his descendants for his mistakes. I looked at Rachel. You can stay here, but there are rules. She nodded eagerly. Anything. First, no secrets. I'm done with secrets. I want to know everything about your mother's life, and I want to know it without you hiding anything. If I ask a question, you answer it. No exceptions. Okay. Second, you'll get a job. I'll help you with childcare while you do. I'll watch Leo while you work. But you have to work. I'm not going to support you forever. I will. I promise. Third, you have to meet Brad. And you have to tell him who you are. I don't know if he'll accept you. I don't know if he'll be angry. But he has to know. And he has to hear it from you. Rachel's face went pale. What if he doesn't want to meet me? Then you meet him anyway. You knock on his door. You tell him the truth. And after that, it's up to him. But you have to try. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. Good. Then you can stay. I showed her to the guest room. It was small, but it had a bed and a window that looked out onto the garden. Leo immediately climbed onto the bed and started bouncing. Thank you, Mrs. O'Connor, Rachel said. I don't know how to thank you. Call me Margaret, I said. And you can thank me by making a life for yourself. That's all I ask. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. I thought about David. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, all the conversations we'd had, all the moments I thought I knew him completely. I hadn't known him at all, but I'd known myself. I'd known that I was a person who could rise above betrayal. I'd known that I was a person who could forgive, even when forgiveness was hard. And I'd known that I was a person who could make a difference in someone's life, even if that someone was a stranger who showed up on my doorstep with a toddler in her arms. That had to count for something. I went inside and called Brad. He answered on the third ring. His voice was cautious. Mom, something happened today, I said. And you need to come over tomorrow. Alone. I need to tell you something. What is it? Are you okay? I'm fine. But you need to hear something, and you need to hear it from me.
He paused.
Okay. I'll be there in the morning. Bring Candace, I said. She should hear it too. The next morning, they both showed up. Brad looked nervous. Candace looked wary. I invited them in and sat them down in the living room. I need to tell you something about your father, I said to Brad. Something I didn't know until yesterday. Brad's face went pale. What is it? I took a deep breath. Your father had another family before me. He was married once before, when he was young. He had a daughter. She died last year. And her daughter, his granddaughter, came to see me yesterday. Brad stared at me like I'd just told him the sky was green. That's impossible. Dad would have told me. Would he? He didn't tell me. He didn't tell anyone. He kept it secret for 35 years. But it's true. And the granddaughter is here. In this house. Candace looked like she'd been slapped. Wait, you let her move in. She needed help. She and her son were living in a car. I couldn't turn her away. Brad stood up. His face was red. You let a stranger move into my house without telling me. Your house? I repeated. Is that what this is still about, the house? Mom, you can't just… I can actually. I have a life estate. I can invite anyone I want to live with me. And I'm not going to let your father's secrets dictate how I treat his family. Brad's jaw tightened. I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him wanted to explode. Part of him wanted to understand. Where is she? He asked. In the guest room. But Brad, before you talk to her, I need you to know something. What? I don't know if she's telling the truth. But she's here. And she's scared. And she's family. That's enough for me. Brad was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded and walked toward the guest room. I didn't follow him. I let him handle it himself. I heard the door open. I heard voices. Low at first, then louder. Then silenced. After a long time, Brad came back. His eyes were wet. It's true, he said. She showed me the letters. Dad's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Candace was quiet. She looked at me with something that might have been respect. So what happens now? She asked. I don't know, I said. But we're going to figure it out. Together. Brad looked at me. You're not angry. I'm angry, I said. I'm angry at your father. I'm angry that he lied to me for 35 years. I'm angry that he left a daughter behind. But I'm not angry at Rachel. And I'm not angry at you. You didn't know any more than I did. Now what? Now we give her a chance.
She's going to get a job.
She's going to find her own place. But for now, she stays here. And we treat her like family. Candace surprised me by speaking first. I don't trust her. Neither do I said. Trust takes time. But she's here, and she's ours. That's the start. Brad sat down heavily on the couch. He put his head in his hands. I could see the weight of everything pressing down on him. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. For everything. For the house. For the letters. For all of it. You don't need to be sorry for the letters. You didn't write them. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have noticed. I should have trusted you. Trust isn't something you just give, I said. It's something you build. We're still building. The following months were hard. Not the kind of hard that breaks you, the kind of hard that makes you stronger. Rachel found a job at a diner 3 blocks away. She walked there every morning with her head held high. I watched Leo while she worked, and I filled my days with the sounds of a toddler's laughter and the smell of finger paints on the kitchen floor. Brad and Candace started coming over again, at first to see Lily, then to see Leo, then just to see us. They didn't ask about the house anymore. They didn't talk about renovations or property values. They just showed up with bags of groceries and helped me cook dinner. One evening, Candace stayed late after Brad left. She helped me wash the dishes and dry them. We stood side by side at the sink, our hands in the warm water. I'm sorry, she said softly. For what? For everything. For pushing. For not trusting you. For all of it. I didn't say anything at first. I just kept washing. I know I'm not easy to love, she continued. I know I'm demanding. I know I want too much. But I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted what everyone wants. A good life. I turned to look at her. She looked tired. But there was something else in her face now. Something softer. I know, I said. And I'm sorry too. For holding on to the house so tightly. For treating it like it was more important than you.
It was important, she said.
It was your home. I should have respected that. I dried my hands and turned to face her. Candace, I've learned something over the last year. It's not about the house. It's not about the money. It's about the people you keep close. And you've kept close to me, even when I made it hard. She smiled, a real smile, the first one I'd seen from her that wasn't rehearsed or calculated. You make it pretty hard. I know. I'm a tough old bird. We both laughed. And for the first time, I felt like we were really going to be okay. A year later, I stood on the porch of my house on Maple Street and watched the sun set. The garden was in full bloom. The hydrangea had grown so big, it was practically a bush. And in the yard, 2 toddlers were chasing each other around a swing set I'd finally agreed to install. Lily and Leo. My grandchildren, they were laughing. That high, wild laugh that only children have. The sound made my chest ache with joy. Inside, Brad was grilling burgers on the back patio. Candace was setting the picnic table with paper plates and streamers. Rachel was helping Leo with a scrape on his knee, even though he was already running again. Patricia was there too. She'd shown up with a casserole and a reluctant apology. I'd accepted it. Not because I'd forgotten what she'd done, but because I'd decided that grudges were too heavy to carry. She was still prickly. She still made comments I didn't like. But she was trying. That counted for something. Margaret. Martin called from the front door. You ready for a drink? I smiled. Martin had become a regular fixture. He'd retired from his law practice 6 months ago, but he still came by for Sunday dinners. He'd become part of the family, in his own quiet way. Gin and tonic, I said. Extra lime. Coming right up. I sat down in my rocking chair and watched my family move around me. They were busy. They were loud. They were sometimes messy and chaotic and frustrating, but they were mine. And that was enough. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep and the adults were sitting around the fire pit, Brad came over and sat on the step next to me. Mom, he said, I've been thinking. About what about the house? You've been so generous. You helped Rachel. You helped Candace. You helped me. And I've never really said thank you. You've said thank you. I mean really thank you. For not giving up on us. I reached out and took his hand. It was the same hand I'd held when he was a boy. The same hand I'd squeezed when he crossed the street for the first time. The same hand I'd let go when he walked into his own life. I never gave up on you, I said. I gave up on trying to control you. But I never gave up on you. That's what I mean. You could have walked away. You could have sold a house and moved to Florida and never talked to us again. But you didn't. You stayed. And you fought. I didn't fight. I just stood my ground. There's a difference. Is there? Fighting means you're trying to win. Standing your ground means you're trying to be true to yourself. I wasn't trying to beat you. I was trying to teach you. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What did you teach me? I thought about it. I thought about all the years I'd spent as a mother. All the lessons I'd tried to impart. All the times I'd failed and all the times I'd succeeded. I taught you that you can't take shortcuts, I said. You can't walk into someone's life and demand things. You have to earn them. And you have to earn them with respect, not with force. He nodded. I learned that. And I taught you that family isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you give. You can't build a future by tearing down someone else's. I know. And I taught you that an old woman with a life estate is still a force to be reckoned with. I smiled. That one was for fun. He laughed. It was a good laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from someone who's finally found peace. Thank you, Mom, he said. For everything. I squeezed his hand. You're welcome. Now go help Candace with the dishes. He groaned, but he got up and went inside. I sat in the dark and looked up at the stars. The same stars David and I used to look at when we were young. The same stars I'd stared at on the nights I couldn't sleep. David was gone. He'd taken his secrets to the grave. But I was still here. And I had made my peace with it because I'd learned something. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about pretending the past never happened. It was about choosing to move forward anyway. I looked at the house behind me. The lights were on. The windows were glowing with the warmth of a family that had been through hell and found its way back. I had a son who loved me. A daughter-in-law who respected me. 2 grandchildren who would grow up knowing their grandmother was a fighter. And a door that was always open. That wasn't just a house anymore. That was a home. And I wasn't going anywhere. Asterisk, asterisk, sometimes the biggest victory isn't winning the fight. It's building a family strong enough to survive one. Asterisk, asterisk, if this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment below. I'd love to know what you'd do if your family came knocking with unexpected news. Because in the end, it's not about the house we live in. It's about the life we build inside it.